Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Props Clear podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Angeline. We're talking all about drones and about improving public perception surrounding the unmanned aviation industry. These episodes are for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only, so none of this constitutes legal advice. Fasten your seatbelts and let's get started. Today's guest is Kyle Nordfors. He's the UAS Chairman at the Mountain Rescue Association, the drone team coordinator at the Weber County Sheriff's Office in Utah, and he is a 737 captain at Alaska Airlines. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me. I know you have a busy schedule between your work with the Mountain Rescue Association and your piloting work as well. So thank you for taking the time to talk.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So first of all, you have so many use cases of using UAS technology to help other people. I know that you had mentioned to me before we spoke in this recording about a couple different examples of using the DJI M30T to help find people in really austere conditions in the mountains of Utah. Can you talk with me about how you're helping Weber County be at the front lines of limiting the amount of time it takes to find a human?
Well, the goal whenever you have a search and rescue scenario is always to try to find your patient as quickly as you possibly can so that you can assess their situation, get your rescuers to them as quickly as possible, and then also get everybody home safely as fast as possible. So what we do with the drones is if we have a cell phone ping or a point last seen, we're able to go use lost person behavior um, search theory, and deploy the drones in a quick, hasty fashion to hopefully be able to find these patients quicker than our ground teams can. And more often than not, we are able to do so. And then with that, with the technology that's aboard some of these drones like the DJI M30, the 300, and some of the Autel products, you're able to get the exact coordinates of the lost patients, and then your ground teams can assess the situation and go directly to them.
That's absolutely incredible. How does it feel to know that you are using technology to help save lives? I'm sure you've met some of the victims that you've helped save. What is that experience like for you?
Well, I remember the very first rescue. It was three young 20-year-old men
Mm.
that were out hiking. They started hiking around 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And come midnight, they decided that they were sufficiently lost on top of a cliff and weren't able to get themselves off the mountain. This was in early April, so the temperatures in that time here in the mountains of Utah, it gets pretty cold. And so
Jeez.
we were using a cell phone ping to try to locate them, but their cell phone ping up in the mountains, since you're unable to triangulate, since you aren't able to get it from all sides, was 3 canyons off. And so with the drone, I was able to locate them. And by the time that the rescuers, our climb team, got to them, they were already falling asleep due to hypothermia. And
Wow.
so, had we not used the technology to find them, they undoubtedly would have perished. And so, when they finally were able to warm them up, get some warm clothes on them, and repel them off the mountain, and they came down to incident command, I'll tell you what, just being able to see them and to see that they're still alive and breathing and doing well, and they're going to be able to go home to their families, it sincerely is a feeling that I can't describe. It is fantastic.
I can't imagine. And the one interesting thing is, with a lot of the technology you have these days, drones can traverse over mountains a lot faster than humans can. And so, what I also noticed is that there's also technology which helps the search and rescue teams find an escape route once they do find that person. And I think that's genius, and that's something I hadn't noticed before or heard about in more in depth or in a specific use case since I saw the video that you sent me. Are you part as you're operating the drone system or part of that team? Are you the one helping to find that escape route for the teams that go forward?
Undoubtedly, yes, I am part of that, but I'm just a lowly pilot. So we usually try to rely on those that have more experience in the field that know the mountains a lot better. Because when you're up on top looking down,
Mhm.
it's vastly different when you're down looking up. And so we project what the drone is seeing up onto a bigger screen at our incident command. And so for those that are intimately familiar with the mountains, they will
Mhm.
also help map that out. So as a drone pilot, I'm just the lowly operator to try to assist the rest of the team. So and they will confer with whether or not a particular route is the best way to go.
I think you're being humble because I think, you introducing this kind of technology to Weber County. I think even back last January, some of your your teammates said that you helped bring that program to the forefront of almost any law enforcement program in the country. So I think you're not giving yourself enough credit. But that's
Well, thank
just
you for that. But no, it's trying to find your spot into the bigger team.
mhm,
And when you're in search and rescue, the people that are on the ground are the real rescuers. They're the real
mhm,
heroes. They're the ones that are actually assessing the situation and getting the patients fit to be able to hike out or be lifted out. We are just a search tool, search mechanism, but this search tool is saving lives. We're enabling those rescuers to get to our patients a lot faster, which in turn saves lives, and it also reduces the exposure to our rescuers as well. There's another scenario under which we've
that's a good
used the
point.
drone technology is that right here, right next to where we live, we have a 5,000-foot sheer cliff. And up on top, there's a lot of areas where snowmobilers like to go snowmobile. There
Mhm,
was a man sitting out of his porch in his backyard with his binoculars, and he was glassing the mountainside, just taking in the scenery, trying to find moose. In the
mhm,
process of doing that, he saw what he thought was a turned over snowmobile. He thought there
mm,
was someone stranded up there, and it was in a very remote area that would be very, very difficult to get to. So instead of deploying our snowmobile team up into that area and to investigate, we deploy the
mhm,
drone. We deployed the drone up there to get a real good eye as to what was, to see if that truly was a snowmobiler, if what their ambulatory status was. By the time we got the drone up there, we realized that it was actually just a boulder that rolled down and hit some scrub oak.
oh, no
And
way, wow,
from the perspective from the ground, it looked like a snowmobile. Even as we were approaching with the drone, it looked like an upturned snowmobile. But
wow,
so this technology, can you imagine the man hours that would have been involved
yeah,
to deploy our teams up there into that area?
oh
So
my gosh,
reducing the amount of exposure. So if you're an incident commander or someone that's working with law enforcement or
mhm,
any other company, you have to mitigate those risks and try to think about what are you uh, exposing your teams to, the risk that you're exposing your team to, and the drones just completely eliminate that altogether.
So let's talk about why you got into drones. You're a 737 captain with Alaska Airlines. But what made you say, I also want to look into drones? Some pilots just say, I just want to fly giant planes. I don't want to fly these little like quadcopters. What made you switch?
Well, in aviation, once you get the true aviation bug, just flying one type of aircraft isn't enough. You need to really expose yourself to other elements of aviation.
Mhm,
So if you talk to most airline pilots, military pilots, general aviation pilots, they've flown multiple types of aircraft. And I've flown from gliders to helicopters to airships to fighter jets to now commercial airliners. And I'm always wanting to expand myself and
mhm,
learn more. I've always also always been a photography nerd. I've always been that guy with the great big huge DSLR out there taking
mhm.
pictures of the family, doing different things like that. And so my wife thought it would be a good idea for me to get a drone, get something that flies with a camera on it. So she bought me one, and that was that. And the way that I was introduced with the search and rescue team, we had our mayor was in our local city here was serving in Afghanistan while also being our current mayor, and he unfortunately passed away. So, in the process of
Oh
the
my
the
gosh.
community trying to honor him, we hung the world's largest free hanging flag in one of our canyons, and they asked me to fly the lines with the drone from one side of the canyon to the next, so that we could stretch the lines across this 1,000-foot canyon. And it was
Wow.
the search and rescue team that was doing the rigging of the flag. And so I met the SAR commander, and we started talking, and he thought, well, sure, let's try this experiment, let's give it a try. And so I went out and bought a thermal drone. It was actually the old Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual
Mhm,
with that terrible thermal camera that's on it. And it was with that drone that those three individuals in their early
wow.
20s, that was the first rescue that we performed with that. So that's how, I guess, the
Wow.
how it progressed for me.
Like, obviously, it wasn't as terrible as it's seen because you were able to find people through that camera, right?
Actually, ironically enough, when it comes to trying to find people at night, we have more
Hmm.
success using just the regular RGB camera
Oh,
because most people will either have their cell phone lights, they'll turn on the lights on their cell phone and they'll wave it up and down, or you can see the glow of their cell phone off their face,
wow.
or they'll have a headlamp or a flashlight. So that pops out more in when you have a dark screen and a single light versus an entire thermal camera. So yeah, more often than not, at night we are using the thermal camera to navigate or to inspect closer. But a lot of times we'll flip it back into that RGB, the wide angle lens, and take in the entire scene, and we're able to find people that way. Actually, we found a couple
Wow.
dogs that ran away in that very same manner. They decided to climb up this cliff face, and they were
Oh my
off in the
gosh.
distance, and the people had no idea how to find them. And but they had one of those GPS collars that was able to be controlled via the satellites. And
Wow.
so they turned on a light, a beacon on their collar while I was flying the drone, and I was able to find the dogs with the RGB camera flying at night, not with the thermal camera. So when you have a drone with these multiple tools, these multiple
Yeah.
cameras, you can't just use one and just rely on one. You have to use all the tools that are available at your disposal.
Wow. You've also been involved in crime scene situations where drones were key to be able to find, the criminal or help figure out what was going on inside of a home. In a lot of those cases, if you're watching some of those videos, the drone, you can hear the drone's motors. You can hear them spinning. There's a push to make whisper quiet drones, which may help that process. Do you think that that would help you in doing your job, make maybe safer and keeping you and others safe, if those drones can be slightly quieter, than than the sound that they make now?
Well, I guess there are some use case scenarios where using a drone in a clandestine environment might
Hmm.
be very beneficial, particularly if you're with the strike force doing a drug bust. I've been involved in some operations where we are performing with the detectives, where we're to catch a predator kind of things, where
Hmm.
they pretended to be a much younger female and trying to lure these predators into a home or into this neighborhood. I could see using quieter drones for that scenario as an Overwatch situation. Most of the law enforcement operations that I've been involved in have been more so like in a SWAT situation,
Hmm.
where we've already pounded on the door quite a bit. They know we're there. So
Hmm.
we've also sent the drone with the different FPV drones, Cine Whoops, or something like the Avata, where we send that in to try to find where the suspect is. And we've been pretty successful with that as well. We were involved with another operation where we didn't know if the armed individual was inside of his house or not, but we did know the report was that he did shoot his wife. And so we were using the drone. All the lights were on inside of the house, and so we were using
Hmm.
an M300 in this scenario, and we were able to peep into all the different windows.
Yeah.
Again, warrants were there, so the all the boxes were checked to make sure that we were following all the laws. But
Yeah.
with that, I was actually able to locate where the victim was by looking through the windows, and unfortunately, she was indeed deceased. But the drones. So then, with that information, you're able to pass that on to the SWAT team, and so
Hmm.
as they're going through the house, they are already armed with that knowledge as to where either the perpetrator is, where the victims are, and it just makes their jobs a lot easier. Again, the entire goal with this tool, with this life-saving
Hmm.
tool, the drones, it's just you're trying to arm the people that are, the boots are on the ground with as much information as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, you live in Ogden, Utah, correct?
Correct.
So a lot of mountainous areas in your places. You've mentioned, even on your LinkedIn page, the importance of drone pilots to know more about making sure their drones stay de-iced, making sure that they stay safe with those extreme temperatures. Especially, we are in wintertime right now. Do you have any tips for what you do in order to do that? I've never flown in those kind of extreme temperatures. So what kind of tips do you have?
Well, I would encourage all drone pilots to really further their knowledge. Try to learn as much as you possibly can in the greater aviation world.
Hmm.
Um, you get on these forums, you get onto different Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups, and
Hmm.
it's shockingly apparent how little some drone pilots know about weather conditions, icing conditions, what temperature does to batteries, and
Hmm.
we really need to, as a community, educate ourselves a little bit more. People are worried that if the humidity is slightly high and if the temperature is below freezing or close to, you're going to get icing. And that's not it. The general aviation knowledge is that you need to be inside of visible moisture. That's fog, rain, snow, any kind of visible moisture at those temperatures. Then the possibility of you getting structural icing increases quite a bit. So, understanding how the temperature affects your aircraft is vitally important. You'll also notice that in those colder temperatures that the performance of the aircraft will increase. And that's just because the more dense air due to the temperatures. But that's generally countered by the lack of battery performance. So understanding all the different nuance that goes into those winter scenarios is vitally important.
You say performance increases in those scenarios. Is that
Correct. So just
correct?
in the one part 107 just briefly goes over it partly, but
Okay.
when you have lower density altitude, then your
Hmm.
performance increases. When you have higher density altitude, your performance decreases.
Hmm.
And so understanding the elements, so this also goes into summertime. So if you're flying in Wyoming is
Hmm.
incredibly high, the altitude.
Hmm.
And if you're flying a general aviation plane into, let's say, Rock Springs, on the ATIS, on the aerodrome terminal information system, it'll always tell you to check density altitude,
Hmm.
because with the warmer temperatures it's going to increase the density altitude, which in turn lowers your performance.
Hmm.
Same thing in wintertime, but it's the opposite.
Oh.
When the temperatures are colder, the air becomes more compact or closer together. Your
Hmm.
density altitude decreases, which increases your performance.
Oh, fascinating. Because I've flown drones, in conditions where it was after a snowstorm or after a tornado or after a hurricane. So we're not necessarily as worried about the elements because when the storms and severe weather are actually happening, you try not to throw your expensive drone into those situations. But I also am aware that batteries can be impacted because I've used regular cameras and the batteries go so much faster in those colder temperatures. And that's one issue with a lot of these drones is if you only have one battery on some of these drones, you're only as good as long as battery lasts. So that's something to think about.
Absolutely. And most of these DJI batteries and the Autel batteries, they're intelligent batteries. So they have a
Mhm.
self-warming mechanism to them. What to do when it is that cold. You need to be able to keep those batteries inside of a warm area, or at least
Mhm.
a room temperature area. So you leave the batteries that you're not using in the vehicle where it's nice and comfortable for the batteries. You got to treat them well.
Yeah, you do. I know. I've talked to people about, wrapping them in a towel or something like that. I have a warming vest and I've got pockets. You can put the tiny batteries in those little pockets or something just to keep them, toasty and not subjected to the elements at all times. And then you also, given the fact that you've taken care and helped save so many people, and you've been on the front lines seeing what happens in mountainous conditions. What kind of tips do you have for people who may go out into winter conditions? Is there anything they should have on them at all times? Is there anything that you said that some of those kids that you first helped save, it was 4 p.m. and by midnight they were lost. Is there a certain time that someone should start saying we should start asking for help, maybe when night falls or something along those lines?
Well, you really need to check your ego at the door when in those kind of scenarios. Just because you might have experience in the elements doesn't necessarily that you're going to be able to overcome some of those elements. We've had several rescues where, um, uh, had the person swallowed their pride earlier and called 911 or reached out for help, we would have had they wouldn't have been in such a precarious or dangerous situation. So go prepared. Make sure you have a headlamp, even if you're thinking that you're going to be back in daylight hours. You never know what the situation might happen. You might
Mm-hmm.
slip off of a cliff. Something might happen. Inevitably, something does happen, and so you need to make sure that you're prepared for that. Know your ins and outs. the terrain. So if you're starting out on one particular trail,
Hmm.
understand where that trail leads to, and understand what the potential or what the terrain is going to be that you may encounter. It's always a good idea to make sure you always have a sufficient water and some
Hmm.
food, no matter what. Even if you're going to be gone for a couple hours, make sure you
Hmm.
have water and food. We've had several rescues where the people would go out on a hike thinking they were only going to be hiking for an hour and two, but then suddenly became severely dehydrated. This
Hmm.
happens in winter just like it does in summertime.
Yeah.
Dehydration is not just a summertime thing. So go prepared, over prepare, be comfortable, make sure you have the proper equipment, and go out and enjoy the outdoors, but just be prepared for it.
Those are all excellent tips. Is there anything you haven't done in your career that you're interested in trying to do now in the future?
Well, so I have a couple hundred hours in a helicopter. I would
Hmm.
definitely love to go out and get my certificate to be able to fly that all the time. When we work with our Department of Public Safety or our medevac helicopters,
Hmm.
I always love talking to those helicopters or those helicopter pilots, because I think they do like real flying. Yeah, I'm flying a jet, an aluminum
Hmm.
pressurized aluminum tube at point 0.8 Mach, so just barely on the skirts of the sound barrier, and it sounds pretty cool, but it's pretty boring. But what they do when they're flying those helicopters inside these canyons, mitigating the winds and pulling people off the mountain, and doing those hoists, and doing all the things that the DPS and these medevac helicopters pilots do. I would love to be able to do that, but I'm going to finish my airline career first before I try to switch jobs. So, but that's to me that's real flying.
I haven't been in a helicopter yet. That's one thing I really would love to be in. I mean, I've covered the military a lot in my career. So I've watched ospreys land and take off, but I'd love to actually be inside of one and feel that experience of, lifting off and going through that process. That would be amazing.
Well, in helicopters, you can do basically whatever you want. If you want to just go straight up, straight down, in whichever direction, you're pretty much you can pretty much do whatever you want. In a airliner, in a jet, fighter jet, general aviation aircraft, you have
Hmm.
to go forward. That's it. That's all you can do. Now, as you're going forward, you can do that in different planes. You can go straight up, you can go straight down, or left and right, but you're going forward. Helicopters, you're not bound by that. You can basically do whatever you want. If you want to go down and hover and check something out, you can do that. If you want to take it up to 10,000 feet and just hover and look over, you can do that. Can't do that in fixed wing.
Well, I think the push is for eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing, which is kind of a combination of both helicopters and uh, airline airline planes. So how do you feel about eVTOL, the future of eVTOL?
Well, that type of, it's just another class of aircraft, and it will definitely play a role that the other aircraft are unable to do so. You mentioned the
Hmm.
Osprey. What a cool aircraft that is.
Hmm. Yeah.
The Marines are able to use that, and it fits their use case scenario very well. And so when it comes to we're talking medevac, for example. A lot of
Hmm.
times, what happens right now is that you have to you get the person out off the mountains or whatever with a helicopter, and then
Hmm.
if you're out in the boonies, then you have to transfer that patient to another airport into a fixed wing, either a Citation or a Pilatus or something like that,
Hmm.
because that aircraft has the speed to get the patient to the
Yeah.
hospital. Whereas an eVTOL or a VTOL would be able to do that all in one if they're able to perfect that design. So you start using the aerodynamic advantages of wings tied with the rotors, and it's a fantastic system. So it's going to be all different types of arrows to have in your quiver, all different
Hmm.
types of tools for different types of jobs.
So who knows? Maybe when you finish your airline career, you'll be flying VTOLs instead of the helicopter because I feel like that future is coming fast.
Hey, if it flies, I'm willing to fly it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Kyle, for your time. I really appreciate it. I've learned so much. And if people can keep an eye on what you're doing and how you're helping to save lives, how can they keep up with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Our SAR team, we do have an Instagram page. The Mountain Rescue Association, which covers 90 different teams, mountain rescue teams in North America, including up in Alaska and all the way down. We also cover a lot of the different teams that are in the Appalachian chain, starting all the way up in upstate New York. We have a MRA Instagram page as well, so you can follow the different ways in which we're trying to employ technology to help save lives. So any of those platforms will work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
If you have topics or suggestions for future episodes, email me, angelswings.jillian@gmail.com. That's ANGELSWINGS.JILLIAN@gmail.com. I'll see you later.